Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Hausen. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama tells about the residents of a building having turned into mindless living corpses, while alien creatures lurk in the basement. The remaining humans are facing a hellish survival challenge. In the opening scene, a 15-year-old boy, Juri, and his father, Jaschek, were moving into their newly rented apartment. At first glance, the towering, dilapidated building loomed ominously. Yuri felt an inexplicable wave of fear in his heart. Working as the building's newly assigned caretaker, Jaschek entered the office only to find no one around to provide a handover or keys. Just as he was wondering where to find the caretaker's keys, a tenant from the 7th floor walked by. Jaschek was about to ask some questions when his toolbox suddenly sprang open and the caretaker's keys tumbled out. While waiting outside, Juri grew bored and saw a homeless man rummaging through trash for food. Feeling sympathetic, Juri handed him a piece of bread. The man didn't offer thanks, but instead handed Juri a strange stone with a mysterious air, saying he'll need this one day, and told him not to tell anyone about it. Just then, Jaschek came out and scolded his son for getting too close to the homeless man. Carrying only a few belongings, the father and son settled into their new home. Jaschek stared absent-mindedly at their shattered family photo, reminiscing about his late wife. Meanwhile, Juri slipped the strange stone under his bed. After dinner, Jaschek tried to wash the dishes, but discovered that the faucet had stopped working. Even after dismantling the pipes, he couldn't fix it. Deciding to leave it for the next day, he went to bed. However, something eerie was happening under Juri's bed. The strange stone was faintly glowing orange. The next morning, Jaschek dressed and began work. He had received a repair request the previous day from a tenant on the 7th floor whose heating had broken down. The rusted pipes required brute force to dismantle, so Jaschek struck them with a hammer. The loud noise woke up the tenant, Cater, who groggily sat up and immediately retrieved a stash of white powder hidden under his pillow. Clearly, Cater was a full-fledged addict. Meanwhile, Jaschek had successfully opened the pipes and was shocked to find black liquid flowing out. He quickly grabbed a metal container to catch it and brought it close to his nose. The stench was overwhelming. Just then, a baby's loud crying echoed down the hallway. Cleo, a new mother, was clearly overwhelmed and unsure what to do. Seeing this, Jaschek gently rocked the baby, soothing it almost immediately. At this moment, Cater stepped out of his room, wary of Jaschek after learning he was the building's new caretaker. What none of them noticed, however, was that the black liquid seemed alive, ceasing its movement as soon as it overflowed from the metal container. Despite his efforts, Jaschek couldn't restore the heating. He put the container away and prepared to leave. Suspecting the source of the issue lay deeper in the building's infrastructure, he headed toward the maintenance room, only to find its door welded shut. Jaschek returned to the office to search for tools. Opening a cabinet, he discovered several large barrels of vinegar stored there. Curiosity piqued. Jaschek wondered why such an odd item was in the maintenance room. Back at the apartment, Juri was bored and began playing with a disassembled water pipe, pretending it was a telescope. By chance, he noticed the interior was covered in sticky black residue. At the same time, Jaschek had violently forced open the maintenance room door. Upon entering, he found the walls coated with the same black slime. Following the corridor deeper inside, Jaschek finally reached the boiler responsible for the heating system. It turned out that the gas system had been completely compromised. Realizing the entire building's heating system was out of service, Jaschek wasted no time and began dismantling the ventilation pipes. As soon as he removed the first section, a torrent of black liquid gushed out, freezing Jaschek in shock. He concluded that the main pipeline must be completely clogged with this substance. Meanwhile, on the 7th floor, Cleo left for work, leaving her boyfriend Cater alone to care for their baby. Hearing the baby cry non-stop, Cater finally noticed that the baby formula had run out. With no money left, he had spent it all on his addiction. He was forced to ask a neighbor for help. The elderly neighbor refused to lend anything but mentioned there was a party on the 3rd floor where Cater might find some luck. Ignoring the suggestion, Cater sneaked into a supermarket and stole a can of formula, only to be caught by a store clerk. Despite not being turned into the police, Cater hurled insults at the clerk as he stormed away, leaving the formula behind. With no other option, Cater went to the 3rd floor gathering. The elderly neighbor warmly invited him to join. Since the building's heating was down, many tenants had gathered there, using firewood to keep warm. Though poor, they were kind-hearted. After hearing Cater's plight, they pooled their remaining change together, enough to buy a can of formula for the baby. Meanwhile, Jaschek was still clearing pipes in the maintenance room when he faintly heard commotion from upstairs. Investigating, he was horrified to find someone burning wood inside the ventilation pipes. Furious, Jaschek grabbed a fire extinguisher and rushed to the third floor, disrupting the gathering and blaming their actions for the clogged heating system. Using his authority as the building's caretaker, he forced everyone to leave. When he returned home, he discovered that the kitchen faucet was working again. It turned out Yuri had cleaned out the black sludge from the pipes while bored at home. Surprised by Yuri's ingenuity, Jaschek asked how he managed to do it. Yuri explained that his late mother had once taught him how vinegar could dissolve most stains. A spark of inspiration struck Jaschek. He retrieved the metal container filled with black liquid from Cleo's apartment and sprinkled some vinegar on it, triggering a violent chemical reaction. Now, understanding why the maintenance room was stocked with so much vinegar, Jaschek devised a plan to clean the sludge. He loaded vinegar into a pressurized sprayer, and as mist filled the pipes, the sludge began to dissolve rapidly. The sounds of furious hissing came from the pipelines as even the pressure gauge needle started spinning uncontrollably. In a moment of carelessness, the force of the sprayer knocked Jaschek unconscious. Elsewhere, Cater was carrying the formula he had bought with the donated money past the garbage room on the 7th floor. His steps faltered. This was the very spot where he used to buy some chilling powders. Back then, all he needed to do was tap the metal lid, drop his cash inside, and the goods would appear from above. Coincidentally, Juri was also heading toward the garbage room on the 3rd floor. Suddenly, the hallway lights began to flicker and dim. Thinking someone was playing a prank, Juri called out but received no response. He retreated to the nearest corner and saw a shadowy figure standing silently ahead, sending a chill down his spine to his smelly butt. Acting on instinct, Juri turned and left in a haste. When he reached the garbage room, he was about to throw away their broken family photo, but noticed a sock filled with cash drop from above. Curious, he peeked inside just as Cater shouted from the upper floor demanding his goods. The lights began to shut off one by one, and a terrified Juri quickly pulled back. The garbage chute's metal door slammed shut on its own. Juri had never experienced anything so eerie. Panicking, he fled the scene. Back at home, Cater, unable to secure any drugs, succumbed to withdrawal symptoms. The sound of his baby crying pushed him to his limits. In a haze, Cater grabbed the child and dashed to the garbage room. Inside, he saw an unsettling orange glow emanating from the chute. Hesitating for a moment, he finally stepped inside. When Cater regained consciousness, the baby was gone. Hanging from the opening of the garbage chute was a scrap of white cloth, part of the swaddle used for the baby. Cater panicked, wondering if his child had fallen into the chute. As Jaschek regained consciousness, he struggled to his feet, shutting off the sprayer's valve and thinking to himself that the black sludge was finally cleared. Sure enough, with a loud rumble, the boiler in the maintenance room ignited and the apartment building's heating system was restored. Meanwhile, Cater's girlfriend returned home from work to discover that both her boyfriend and child were missing. Juri, who had fallen asleep at home, was abruptly awakened by urgent knocking at the door. It was Cater, pleading for help because his baby had fallen into the garbage chute. Yuri immediately unlocked the garbage station door, the final destination for all trash in the building. But no matter how hard Cater searched, all he could find was the cloth that had wrapped his child. Overwhelmed, the man broke down in tears. Yet Juri could still faintly hear a baby crying from within the garbage chute, which suggests that the child might still be stuck somewhere inside. The two immediately called the fire department. Afterwards, a firefighter secured with a safety rope began inspecting each level. At the 6th floor, he found a patch of black sludge clinging to the walls, which seemed to wriggle as if alive. Just as he was about to call for backup, someone on the upper floors dumped more trash down the chute, forcing the search to be abandoned. With no other choice, Cater and Cleo went door to door asking for help, but the building's residents were unusually cold and refused to even open their doors. Only the newly moved-in Jaschek and Juri showed genuine concern. Jaschek, bringing out the building's blueprints, discovered that the garbage chute was connected to the ventilation ducts. Silently cursing the poor design, Jaschek began searching for the baby. At home, Yuri kept hearing the faint cries of a baby coming from the pipes. He spread out the blueprints and memorized the location of the garbage chute. While walking through a corridor, someone suddenly pulled him into a room. Juri instantly recognized the figure as the shadow he had seen earlier in the hallway. Together, they navigated several corridors and eventually reached an abandoned room. Realizing he was unfamiliar with the area, Yuri decided to ask the boy, Dennis, to help him search for the baby. Before Dennis could agree, Juri noticed that their location didn't appear on the blueprints. It was marked as a blank space. Dennis froze for a moment, his expression shifting before he enthusiastically offered to fetch some tools from home. Curious, Juri followed Dennis to his apartment. As they opened the door, a foul stench assaulted Juri's senses. He asked Dennis where his mother was, and Dennis quietly replied that she was asleep, urging Juri to tread lightly. From a cabinet, Dennis retrieved a glass cup which he referred to as a tool. Dennis explained that by pressing the glass against a wall, one could hear faint, otherwise inaudible sounds. Intrigued, Juri tried it and was amazed at how effective it was. After inspecting several hallways, Juri finally heard the faint cries of the baby, but the path ahead was blocked by an iron door. Dennis seemed frightened and urged Juri to give up and go back. Refusing to abandon the search, Juri dashed home, borrowed 50 from his father, and secretly took the caretaker's keys. He used the money to buy a complete lockpicking kit from a store. With everything prepared, Juri successfully unlocked the door. When Dennis tried to stop him from entering, Juri sternly told him to stay put. At the same time, Kater and Cleo, who had been resting at home, suddenly heard the baby's cries echoing through the ventilation pipes. They rushed to Jaschek for help, and together they traced the sound to the maintenance room on the first floor. However, Jaschek soon realized that the caretaker's keys were missing. Meanwhile, Juri, using the glass tool, had pinpointed the baby's location. Strangely, though, the baby was clearly on the other side, yet there were no doors or windows to access the area. Frustrated, Juri searched every inch of the wall and finally found a patch of black sludge. Out of curiosity, he reached out to touch it, only to discover that his hand could penetrate the wall. On the other side was a foul, polluted space filled with mounds of black sludge. Suddenly, a bubble rose from the sludge, and Juri felt his arm being tightly gripped. No matter how hard he pulled, his arm wouldn't budge. Then the wall behind him began to move, slowly revealing a grotesque face. Juri looked closer and realized it was a ferocious stray dog. Startled, he yanked his arm free with all his might, only for the dog's head to vanish inexplicably. On the other side, Jaschek and the others had finally forced open the maintenance room door. Inside stood a disheveled, wild-haired figure. Sensing their approach, the man grinned maliciously and stabbed a knife into the object he was holding. Ignoring the danger, Cleo rushed forward and snatched the object, only to discover it was a wooden doll. The strange man had been mimicking the sound of a crying baby. Jaschek's eyes narrowed as he recognized the prankster. It was the homeless man who had spoken to Juri when they first moved in. When Juri returned home, Jaschek was about to scold him, but Juri anxiously blurted out that the baby had been found. He mentioned seeing a vicious dog nearby, so Jaschek brought a hammer for protection. The two quickly returned to the dirty wall Juri had mentioned, only to find it had hardened since earlier. Without hesitation, Jaschek swung his hammer, smashing a hole in the wall. Juri peered inside, but found nothing. Grabbing his son, Jaschek reprimanded him, saying that ever since they lost Juri's mother, all he did was imagine things and act paranoid. Silenced, Juri reluctantly handed over the caretaker's keys. Shortly after they left, however, the sound of a baby crying echoed once again from the crumbling wall. This time, the cries abruptly stopped, as if the baby had been yanked away by a powerful force. The scene shifts to a man who failed to notice that the kitchen faucet was now dripping black liquid. Hearing barking from the caged dog, he angrily carried a pan of the sludge over. After the dog drank a few gulps, its eyes sharpened with a predatory gleam, and it burst out of the cage, shattering the lock. On the other side, Jaschek, now walking Yuri to school, spotted the dog and immediately sensed danger. He was determined not to let it roam freely through the building. However, when he reached the end of the hallway, the dog had vanished. All that remained was a noticeable black stain on the wall. If Juri had been there, he would have guessed that the dog had entered the wall, as he had witnessed similar events before. Undeterred, Jaschek carried a bag of meat scraps to lure the dog out. Spotting a pile of feces on the hallway floor, Jaschek muttered a curse under his breath and crouched to clean it up. To his surprise, a cat in fat emerged from a nearby room. The cat's owner, seeing Jaschek cleaning up after her pet, was so moved that she became teary-eyed, marveling at how thoughtful the new caretaker was. She learned that Jaschek was also the one who fixed the broken heating and insisted on inviting him for lunch. Hearing about the hunt for a vicious, stray dog, the cat owner encouraged Jaschek to focus on searching for the missing baby while he organized the residents to capture the dog. Meanwhile, Cater, now desperate, approached a drug dealer downstairs and pleaded that he didn't need the drugs anymore. He just told him to give back his child. The dealer was baffled, wondering why he would have his kid. He scoffed before calling his goons to kick Cater's smelly butt out. A devastated Cater returned home to find his girlfriend Cleo packing her things. She had finally had enough of his failures and announced that she was leaving him. By dinner time, Jaschek mentioned the homeless man to Juri, describing him as a complete lunatic. Just then, a knock came at the door. When they opened it, they found Cleo, now homeless herself, pleading with Jaschek to let her stay. True to his word, the cat owner organized a search for the stray dog the next day. Despite the operation's scale, it was thwarted by a traitor among the residents. The drug dealer had been waiting at the staircase and intercepted the dog before anyone else could capture it. In the dim basement of the building, the homeless man was busy collecting the black sludge, seemingly obsessed with the strange liquid. He stirred it thoroughly in a large pot and then poured it into jars for storage. Meanwhile, Yuri, just returning home, thought he saw the ghostly figure of his deceased mother, who pointed toward the ceiling. Moments later, Juri woke up startled from his dream, feeling as though the stone he had found bore a striking resemblance to the eye he had seen. Stepping out of his room, he noticed Cleo had already made breakfast, and it seemed she and his father had grown remarkably close overnight. Frustrated, Yuri stormed out and headed to the garbage station, intending to throw away the stone. Just as he was about to let go, it began to glow faintly orange, prompting him to hesitate and pull his hand back, deciding against discarding it for now. While stepping into the elevator, Yuri unexpectedly encountered 3 drug dealers, followed closely by the feral dog. Keeping his guard up, Yuri noted that the elevator stopped on the 6th floor, a floor where the elevator doors were sealed shut, accessible only by stairs. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker, and Dennis, the boy Yuri had met earlier, appeared. Dennis asked Yuri to help unlock a metal cage with the caretaker's key he had acquired. Opening the cage, a calico cat emerged. Dennis explained that the cat had originally been his, but was locked up by the previous caretaker. Spotting animal remains inside the cage, Juri grew wary, thinking if there was something wrong with the cat. Brushing aside his suspicions, Yuri decided to follow the drug dealer's example and stop the elevator on the 6th floor. Observing the surroundings, he noticed a hidden door in a discreet corner. Using the caretaker's key, he opened it to reveal a passageway. Unable to resist his curiosity, Yuri crawled through the tunnel, which led him into a room that turned out to be the drug dealer's workshop. On the table was a pot brewing the same black sludge the homeless man had been working on. When Yuri opened a wooden cabinet, he saw a drawing of an eye on the wall, identical to the one from his dream. Lost in thought, he was startled by the sound of the elevator. The drug dealers had returned. Juri hid under the table and slipped out of the workshop while they were distracted, only to find himself face to face with the vicious dog. It turned out that another dealer was in the elevator as well. Juri knew he was in serious trouble. The gang leader, Ninja, wanted him to try the black sludge, but Juri quickly claimed he was there to make a deal, offering the caretaker's key in exchange for being allowed to join their ranks. To the dealers, this seemed like a great deal. They gave Yuri a crash course in their distribution process. When someone knocked, it meant a customer was ready. After payment was received, an accomplice on a higher floor would drop the goods down discreetly, ensuring maximum security. Juri finally understood why he often heard knocking while taking out the trash. Impressed, Ninja praised Juri's resourcefulness and assigned him to guard the vicious dog for 24 hours, a task dreaded by all residents. Coincidentally, at that moment, Cater was near the garbage chute, pouring powdered formula into it, hoping to feed his stuck baby. A weirdo neighbor passing by noticed his dazed state and stayed nearby until he collapsed. This weirdo neighbor dragged Cater into her home, possibly attempting to have a baby with him. This indicates that there were few normal people left in this building. Meanwhile, Juri attempted to lead the dog to an isolated area, only to run into its original owner. Before he could escape, the man punched him unconscious. When Juri came to, the dog was long gone, and he desperately searched for it, tracing its dog shit. Just then, Dennis appeared again, asking for help because his cat had stopped eating. Preoccupied, Juri dismissed him with a few words and hurried off. Disheartened, Dennis returned home and spoke to his cat, muttering to himself. Suddenly, a low voice echoed from the ventilation pipes, advising Dennis to feed the cat whatever it desired. Realization dawned on Dennis as he remembered the animal remains in the cage. Grabbing a wire, he headed to the hallway, where the plump cat from a helpful neighbor's home had just wandered out. Elsewhere, Juri quietly followed the dog's owner to his home, waiting for him to fall asleep so he could release the dog. However, the cage was locked, forcing Juri to sneak to the table and steal the key. In doing so, he accidentally knocked over a bottle, but fortunately, the owner did not wake up since he was snoring like a loud pig. Sweating with fear, Juri hastily unlocked the cage, only to find the man standing behind him. Juri's heart sank as the man pinned his chicken muscles to the floor and began beating him mercilessly like hitting a Barbie toy. To make matters worse, the man grabbed an electric rod, and Juri feared his fate was sealed. Suddenly, the feral dog lunged out of the cage and attacked its owner, scaring the dog shit out of him. Seizing the opportunity, Juri kicked the electric rod aside. As the dog rendered its master unconscious, Juri gripped the glowing stone in his hand. The dog immediately turned docile, behaving like a sheep in front of Juri. When the test period was over, Juri brought the dog to Ninja, officially earning a place in their gang ranks. Meanwhile, the building caretaker, Jaschek, was unaware that his son was treading down a dangerous path. While repairing the hallway lights, he received a sudden call from the insurance company. It turned out that his previous house had burned down, and the claim payout was still under review. No wonder he and Juri had been forced to move into this rundown apartment. Not long after, an insurance investigator arrived at the building specifically seeking Jaschek. At first, Jaschek assumed his compensation had been approved, but instead, the investigator delivered bad news. Although Jaschek's wife had perished in the fire, the circumstances were suspicious. The fire alarm had been deactivated before the blaze started, and based on this evidence alone, the insurance company had grounds to deny the claim. Jaschek's expression darkened as he asked the investigator who else knew he was here. The investigator told him this was his informal visit, but he would submit the evidence tomorrow unless Jaschek was willing to split half the compensation with him. At that moment, Jaschek felt a murderous impulse. He didn't notice, however, the black sludge seeping through the vents and into the electrical box. Within moments, the box was filled, causing the lights to flicker violently before the box exploded. The investigator was knocked to the ground and the electrical box toppled toward him. Luckily, Jaschek pulled him away just in time, saving his life. Shaken, the investigator returned the fire alarm to Jaschek, promising that the payout would be approved within days. Without hesitation, Jaschek smashed the alarm to pieces. This might suggest that he had intentionally burned down his own house. The investigator, having left the building, soon realized he was lost. Unable to get any signal on his phone, he wandered aimlessly through the dim hallways. Turning suddenly, he noticed the blackened walls seemed to ripple and shift. Swallowing his fear, he pressed onward until he reached the end of the passage and encountered someone. It's the homeless man who burst into maniacal laughter. Moments later, the ground beneath him turned soft, and as the investigator struggled to escape, he sank deeper into the black sludge. In no time, he was completely consumed, including his smelly part. Meanwhile, Juri decided to make amends with Dennis for neglecting him earlier. He knocked on Dennis's door to apologize, but Dennis refused to answer, saying his problem was already solved. Heading into the kitchen, Dennis saw his calico cat devouring the friendly neighbor's plump cat. From the vents came a chilling voice, saying his mother would never come back, and no one in this world cared about him. Dennis found this logic increasingly convincing and, following the voice's instructions, climbed into the oven. By now, it was clear that some kind of entity thrived in the building, feeding on the residents' despair. Among its allies were the homeless man and 3 drug dealers. The scene shifts to one late night when Jaschek received a complaint from a tenant about a foul odor coming from the apartment above. When knocking yielded no response, Jaschek unlocked the door with his caretaker's key. The stench was overwhelming as he stepped inside. The apartment appeared abandoned, with thick cobwebs covering the furniture. The elderly neighbor explained that the unit had once belonged to a single mother with a son named Dennis, who had disappeared years ago. In the bedroom, Jaschek made a horrifying discovery. Attached to the headboard was a massive black stain. Pulling back the bedspread revealed a rotting corpse. Jaschek wasted no time reporting the body and had it removed from the building. In the cramped elevator, Jaschek and 2 others endured the overpowering stench in silence, exchanging uneasy glances. Meanwhile, Ninja, the lead drug dealer, met the homeless man in the basement to purchase several bottles of black sludge. After the deal, the homeless man joked that he should watch his dog before vanishing with the animal. It turned out the homeless man was the true master of the black sludge, selling the raw material to the drug dealers. With a simple cooking process, the sludge hardened into black bricks. The drug Ninja peddled was no ordinary narcotic. It was this building's sinister specialty. Anyone who touched it even once became irreversibly addicted. Many of the building's residents had fallen victim, allowing Ninja to amass a fortune, while the homeless man maintained indirect control over the entire complex. One day, Cleo checked her mailbox and found an anonymous letter inside, telling her they could help her find her child. Clinging to hope, she immediately went home and called the number provided. The sender, who lived on the 13th floor, requested that Cleo bring a photograph of her child. After hanging up the phone, Cleo rushed to the sender's address. The door was answered by a disheveled woman who introduced herself as a fortune teller, claiming she could reveal what people cared about most. Cleo watched as the woman burned her child's photograph, and under the flickering candlelight, Cleo began mimicking the woman's chanting. The room filled with dense smoke, and Cleo's pupils began to dilate. In a haze, she saw her child, now grown, playing with her in a brightly lit room. Overwhelmed with emotion, she wept like a giant baby, wishing the vision could last forever. But the fortune teller interrupted, saying her time was up, and what she had seen was a glimpse of her future. Tearfully, Cleo handed over all the cash she had as thanks. The old woman nodded, reminding her that she could always return if needed. Once Cleo left, the woman hurriedly scooped the black sludge from the candlestick and swallowed it. It turned out that the vision Cleo had witnessed was merely the hallucinatory effect of the burning sludge. No wonder so many residents were addicted to it. Meanwhile, in Dennis's house, the oven door swung open, and the homeless man emerged as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Familiar with his surroundings, he retrieved a photo of Dennis and his mother from a corner before heading to the late single mother's bedroom. He reached into the black hole on the wall, which emitted a radiant orange glow reminiscent of a rising sun in the universe. Just then, the front door opened, and two thieves entered, hoping to loot valuables after hearing of the owner's death. They ignored the skeletal remains of the plump cat on the floor and headed straight for the bedroom. Alerted by the noise, the homeless man slipped into the walls unnoticed. The thieves, intrigued by the black hole, began to inspect it. Watching from his hidden perch, the homeless man furiously widened his eyes and retrieved a jar of orange sludge from his coat. As he began to stir it, another black hole appeared in the ceiling. One of the thieves clutched his chest, his heart violently contracting. His companion, realizing something was wrong, dragged him out of the apartment, but it was too late. The thief collapsed after only a few steps, his eyes wide open, lifeless. The thief's agonized chicken scream echoed through the quiet building, but the drug dealers were unfazed. Ninja divided the day's earnings among his men, giving Juri, the rookie, an equal share. Some older members grumbled, how could a newbie like Juri deserve the same cut? But Ninja seemed to favor Yuri, ignoring their complaints as he led the boy away from the stairwell. Jaschek, frustrated with his son's behavior, confronted Yuri and demanded he come home. However, Yuri refused to listen, stubbornly defying his father. Jaschek, furious, warned him if he didn't come home tonight, he should never come back at all. Seething, Jaschek stormed into the elevator, intending to inspect the basement equipment. But suddenly the elevator jolted and came to a stop on the first floor, losing power. Shouting for help yielded no response. Realizing he was the caretaker, Jaschek climbed onto the roof of the elevator to investigate. Unfortunately, he hit a live wire and was knocked unconscious, collapsing back into the elevator. A passerby noticed but assumed Jaschek would figure it out eventually. And so Jaschek remained there, unmoving, as no one came to help. Unaware of his father's life-threatening situation, Juri felt a twinge of guilt for defying him yet again. Ninja reassured Juri not to dwell on it, claiming all fathers were the same. He then brought Juri to his home. In the dim dining room, Ninja's alcoholic father snored like a pig loudly at the table. Watching Ninja's anger-fueled movements, Juri realized that Ninja was using every opportunity to exact revenge for his abusive childhood. Horrified, Juri froze in place, vowing not to let his relationship with his father deteriorate to such an extent. After leaving the room, Ninja led Juri to the rooftop of the building. Gazing at the city below, Ninja confided no one in this world cared about him and suggested they stick together and build a new family. Juri felt a chill run down his spine all the way to his butt. He replied he couldn't live without his father before walking away, leaving Ninja standing alone under the night sky. When Yuri returned home, he found his father missing. A sense of foreboding rose within Juri as he frantically ran through the hallways, shouting, Awakened by the noise, Jaschek pounded on the elevator door, calling for help. Hearing the commotion, Yuri rushed over, but even together they couldn't pry open the iron door. Jaschek instructed Yuri to activate the elevator's backup power. Yuri sprinted to the rooftop utility room and pulled the main switch, finally restoring power to the elevator. However, as Yuri turned back, he noticed the elevator doors had opened on their own. Curious, he leaned forward to look, only to see his father trapped inside. As Yuri turned cautiously, he was met face to face with Ninja, whose expression was dark and menacing. Without a word, Ninja shoved Yuri with both hands. Fortunately, Yuri managed to grab the edge of the wall, crying for help. Ninja, however, simply turned and walked away. Moments later, the elevator door closed on its own, sending Yuri plunging into the elevator shaft. The sound of the fall startled Jaschek, who turned to see his son's arm dangling lifelessly. His legs went weak with fear. To make matters worse, the elevator began moving on its own, heading toward the rooftop and threatening to crush Yuri. With a roar of rage, Jaschek yanked the power switch once more, stopping the elevator just in time. Yuri was incredibly lucky. Despite the fall, he only suffered fractures. The doctor assured Jaschek that with rest, Yuri would recover in time. Jaschek, however, was in desperate need of money. He thought about the insurance payout, only to learn that the investigator had disappeared. Without his signature, the claim couldn't be processed. Furious, Jaschek wanted to scream. Meanwhile, the apartment building seemed to demand all his time and energy, leaving him no room to care for Yuri. Seeing this, Cleo handed Jaschek a job listing for an electrical engineer. The idea of switching careers sparked Jaschek's interest. He had been thinking about leaving his current role for a while. Later that evening, while visiting Yuri in the hospital, his son mentioned that something in the apartment seemed to want him dead. Yuri didn't name Ninja as the culprit, instead blaming the eerie behavior of the elevator doors. Jaschek nodded in agreement, admitting he too found the building unsettling. The next morning, Jaschek dressed smartly for his interview with the new company, but trouble struck as soon as he stepped outside. His car refused to start. Opening the hood, he discovered it was clogged with black sludge. With no other choice, Jaschek hailed a taxi. As he checked in at the company's front desk, he noticed his shoes were sticky, only to realize the soles were coated with the same black liquid. Excusing himself, Jaschek retreated to the restroom to clean his shoes. As he wiped away the sludge with a rag, he glanced up and noticed black stains spreading across the mirror. Horrified, he stumbled backward, but when he turned around, the stains were gone. The shock triggered a seizure, and Jaschek collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Missing his interview completely, Jaschek found himself sitting at home, dejected and filled with regret. Cleo rushed over to comfort him, but Jaschek, agitated, accidentally blurted out that her child was still missing. The comment led to a heated argument, and Cleo decided to move back to her own apartment. Upon arrival, she found the space eerily empty, wondering why her boyfriend, Cater, wasn't home. What she didn't know was that Cater was at the weirdo neighbor's apartment on the same floor, his vacant gaze fixed ahead while a thick chain was secured around his ankle. The weirdo neighbor was carrying a baby bottle to the garbage chute, seemingly to feed the child. Clearly, this woman wasn't normal. Cleo, feeling increasingly empty after leaving Jaschek, began frequenting the fortune teller. It wasn't long before she also became addicted to the black sludge. Meanwhile, Yuri, bored in his hospital bed, passed the time by drawing. The elderly woman in the neighboring bed, who happened to be a longtime resident of the building, noticed Yuri's drawing of Dennis and was surprised. She asked how Yuri knew the boy since Dennis had been missing for years. Yuri was stunned, insisting that he'd been seeing Dennis every day. But the elderly woman was adamant, saying Dennis used to wait by the elevator for his mother every day after school, but he had disappeared long ago. Yuri felt chills run down his spine, thinking that he might have been seeing a ghost. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became. That night, he snuck out of the hospital, determined to return to the apartment and uncover the truth. While on duty, Jaschek received a sudden call. The person claimed to be from the property management company, warning him not to look for work elsewhere. Defeated after his failed job search, Jaschek worried about losing his position as a caretaker and hurriedly assured the caller he wouldn't leave. What Jaschek didn't realize was that the phone line had long been contaminated with black sludge. While monitoring the security room cameras, Jaschek saw the screen flicker. A woman wearing a sweater appeared, walking into the building. Sweat dripped from Jaschek's forehead as he recognized her. It was his wife, who had been dead for years. Trying to steady his nerves, he repeated to himself that she was not real. Everything around him returned to normal, but Jaschek knew the eerie incident wasn't over. Meanwhile, Juri had been discharged from the hospital. When he spotted the lobby's surveillance cameras, he figured his father must have installed them. While passing through a hallway, Juri ran into the store clerk from the local grocery shop. Sharing his intent to find the ghostly boy, Juri's words intrigued the bored clerk, who immediately volunteered to join the search. However, Jaschek, monitoring the cameras, saw everything and barked at Juri to go back to the hospital. Juri ignored his father, taking the clerk to an unexplored corridor not marked on the building's blueprints. As Jaschek watched from the surveillance room, Juri and the clerk suddenly vanished from view. Juri and the clerk reached the end of the hallway where Juri remembered a hidden door for which the ghost boy had once shown him the key. After unlocking it, Juri entered the room he had once shared with Dennis, though the boy was nowhere to be found. He scanned the surroundings and realized the space had once been a recreational room. The notice board had a forced opening gouged into it, reminding Juri of the time Dennis had taken food from the fridge. Curious, Juri opened the fridge door to find it packed with rotting food and a torn photograph. As Juri reached for the photo, he was suddenly pulled into the fridge by an invisible force. The door slammed shut behind him and he felt himself sinking into black sludge. Outside, the clerk panicked, mustering all her strength to pry the fridge open with a cane. When Juri emerged, gasping for breath, he remembered the torn photograph whose outline perfectly matched the gouge in the notice board. On the board was the caption saying the building's first resident, Dennis. A realization dawned on Juri. This photo contained a crucial secret. Meanwhile, the homeless man descended once more into the black sludge cave, the orange glow within shining as brightly as a rising sun in the cosmos. In the meantime, Juri sought out the elderly woman in the neighboring hospital bed, asking about Dennis. Upon seeing the photo of the recreational room mural, the woman's expression turned blank. She only remembered Dennis standing in the hall, waiting for his mother, but had no recollection of the mural being taken. Determined to uncover the truth, Juri decided to gather all the residents depicted in the mural for answers. As Juri left the hallway, he found Jaschek waiting at the door, furious at Yuri's disheveled state. Jaschek snapped at him to go clean himself up in the bathroom. Peeking out the window while washing, Juri spotted Ninja standing idly at the base of the building. He recalled Ninja's earlier attempt to push him down the elevator shaft, yet strangely he couldn't muster any hatred for him. Perhaps Juri's own choices had driven Ninja to such coldness. In the lobby, Jaschek heard the front door creak open. This time he saw it clearly. It was the ghost of his wife. By the time Juri emerged from the bathroom, Jaschek's demeanor had completely changed. Looking revitalized, he told Juri not to bother with school, and instead took him to the surveillance room, instructing him to monitor the cameras for any rule violations among the residents. Jaschek then left to install more cameras in the hallways. Curious about Jaschek's extensive notes, Juri wondered why his father was suddenly so invested in his job, given his plans to quit. Just then, Juri spotted his father on the monitor, standing and staring blankly into space. It was clear Jaschek had seen his wife's ghost again. Juri was about to approach his father when the store clerk interrupted, claiming she had forgotten her keys. Jaschek quickly unlocked her apartment with the caretaker's key, only for the clerk to reveal she had another issue. It turns out she was deliberately stalling Jaschek so Juri could bring the elderly woman to the surveillance room. There, the woman accessed the building's announcement system, inviting all residents to celebrate the building's 40th anniversary in the recreational room. By the time Jaschek realized what was happening, it was too late. Residents had already begun dressing up for the rare neighborhood gathering. Having lost her child, Cleo had no interest in participating in such meaningless events. Distraught, she wandered past the garbage chute and happened to see the mad woman holding her missing child's baby bottle. Instantly alert, Cleo quietly retreated and followed the mad woman to confirm her room. Pressing her ear to the door, she was stunned to hear her boyfriend Cater's voice inside. Suppressing her excitement, she waited for the mad woman to leave. The moment the coast was clear, Cleo rushed to the door and called Cater's name. Hearing no response, she forcibly broke down the door. Inside, she found Cater sitting blankly in front of the television. She called out to him repeatedly, but it was as though he didn't even recognize himself. Cleo tried to take Cater away, but he was chained to the floor. Just then, the mad woman returned. Seeing an intruder, she naively offered to pour tea. Cleo noticed the teapot contained black sludge, and without thinking, she punched the mad woman. She then tried to jog Cater's memory, but he kept repeating he wanted the black blocks. Cleo grew anxious, failing to notice the mad woman getting up behind her. The next moment, Cleo was struck on the head with the teapot and knocked unconscious. When she awoke, the madwoman was gently wiping blood from her forehead. Cleo felt a chill run down her spine and quickly fled the room. Cotter, seeming to regain some clarity, softly muttered their child's name. By dinner time, Cater's mind had fully recovered. He pleaded with the madwoman to set him free. Although reluctant, she finally agreed, her attachment to him clear. Meanwhile, the residents were gradually gathering in the recreational room, and the turnout was far larger than expected. Wasting no time, Juri asked if anyone remembered the building's first child. He then dramatically removed the cloth covering the notice board, revealing a photograph. The residents stared at the photo, their expressions shifting from confusion to realization as they recognized it. Their eyes brightened, and they began animatedly discussing the picture. Piece by piece, long-forgotten memories resurfaced. It was decades ago when a pregnant woman gave birth prematurely, but safely delivered her baby Dennis. The neighbors, overjoyed, believed the child would bring good fortune to the building. However, as Dennis grew older, his single mother found work at a bar, leaving him home alone for long periods. One day, Dennis suddenly vanished without a trace, but his mother didn't notice until several days later. The neighbors also gradually forgot about him, though they were plagued by recurring, identical dreams every night. Just as the memories were piecing together, Jaschek burst into the room and inexplicably dispersed the crowd. After ordering Juri to go home, Jaschek headed alone to the basement maintenance room, where his wife's spirit appeared again. This time, his expression was calm, as if reuniting with a long-lost lover. The two embraced for a hormone yoga session as though nothing had ever happened. When the session was over after 2 minutes, Jaschek awoke in a pool of sludge. There was no doubt his wife's spirit was formed from the black sludge, meant to indirectly control him as the building's caretaker. Yet Jaschek remained unaware of the building's other sinister inhabitant. Compiling the information shared by the neighbors, Yuri concluded that some kind of creature resided within the building. It seemed to thrive on creating misery and erasing happiness, and he knew it had to be eliminated. Juri attempted to reach into the black hole only to find nothing. Instead, he caught the attention of the homeless man who seemed to sense the creature constantly watching everyone. As Juri walked down the hallway, the homeless man followed quietly, though when Juri turned around, there was no one there. Juri crouched to inspect the hole his father had smashed, but he couldn't find anything unusual. Just then, a shadow flashed at the corner. Pointing his flashlight, Juri froze. It was the dog owner who had previously suffered a backlash from the sludge. Terrified, Juri fled back home, only to find his father talking to thin air. Juri was certain the black sludge had taken control of his father. When he voiced his suspicions, Jaschek furiously dismissed him as delusional, shoving him into his room and ordering him to reflect on his behavior. Juri leaned against the door, once again overhearing his father talking, seemingly about sending him away somewhere. Feeling a chill, Juri quickly found an excuse to leave the house. Meanwhile, the ghostly figure of his mother continued to manipulate Jaschek, saying he barely even knew his son. Struck by the comment, Jaschek rushed into his son's room, rummaging through his belongings until he discovered numerous drawings of demons and monsters hidden in the drawers. On his side, Juri resolved to take action after much deliberation. Though he didn't know how to defeat the creature controlling the building, he decided he could at least destroy its hold over the residents. Together with the store clerk, Juri carried gasoline to the black block processing workshop. They planned to burn it down, cutting off the residents' supply of the addictive black blocks. However, before they could proceed, Ninja walked in. Juri hurriedly explained the situation, detailing the harm caused by the black blocks, but Ninja, filled with jealousy, glared at the store clerk instead of listening. It wasn't until Juri clarified that he and the store clerk were merely friends that Ninja finally pulled out a lighter and set fire to the gasoline-soaked floor. As the flames spread, the black sludge and its processed blocks melted away at a visible speed. Juri felt a glimmer of hope. This was the first step in breaking the nightmare's grip. For the building's addicts, their source was now permanently cut off. As the fire subsided, the trio hurriedly exited the workshop. The monster in the basement seemed to sense the disturbance, emitting a low, angry roar. The elevator Juri used began shaking violently, as though the black sludge was preparing a vengeful attack. Parting ways with the others, Juri went straight to the dog owner's house. Surprisingly, the man had survived, and Juri had come to apologize. Previously, under the influence of the black creature, Juri had unleashed the dog on its owner. To test Juri's sincerity, the man leaned in, exposing his scarred face. Understanding the gesture, Juri suppressed his discomfort and began applying ointment to the wounds. At that moment, the wall next to them began to ripple and shift. The black sludge creature had followed Juri here. The dog owner told him to run before grabbing a knife from the table. He hoped Juri would help bring sunlight back to the building, but the knife suddenly turned on its owner. Juri could only watch in horror as the creature manipulated the man into stabbing himself. As the man collapsed, Juri fled in terror. The monstrous being had finally revealed itself, and the building's residents were left to face its wrath. Juri, having witnessed the creature commit murder, raced home to seek his father's help. But Jaschek dismissed his son's account as nonsense, angrily locking him in his room. Jaschek's violent behavior was a result of his ghostly wife's manipulation. Determined to escape, Juri tried to force the door open, but was horrified to see black sludge oozing from the keyhole, suggesting the creature was still targeting him. In the dim and eerie basement, the homeless man knelt reverently before the black sludge cave. The creature itself spoke, labeling Juri a nuisance that needed to be eliminated. The homeless man immediately obeyed, leaving with the demeanor of the creature's envoy. Meanwhile, the ghostly wife continued to whisper to Jaschek that his son was unwell and keeping him locked up would cause him to hurt himself. Jaschek found her reasoning convincing. After making a phone call, he opened Juri's door. Stepping out cautiously, Juri noticed a stranger seated at the dining table, fiddling with a toy car that seemed oddly familiar. He couldn't quite recall where he'd seen it before. Jaschek introduced the man as a psychologist, explaining that he had decided to send Juri to a rehabilitation center. The psychologist added their facility had a closed management system and patients were only discharged after a full recovery. Juri felt a chill run down his spine. His father hadn't even asked for his opinion. He knew no explanation would convince his father otherwise. Following the psychologist into the hallway, Juri noticed that the man's face began to change. It was morphing back into the homeless man. Jaschek, watching his son leave, suddenly realized he hadn't even asked for the center's address. Panic-stricken, he called the facility, only to hear a busy signal. It was then that Jaschek realized he had been deceived. Rushing to the monitoring room, Jaschek planned to use the surveillance system to warn Juri, but all the screens displayed were images of his ghostly wife. Jaschek's expression turned to dread as he saw the scene of their home engulfed in flames, a memory he had tried so hard to bury and one that continued to haunt him deeply. Upon seeing the familiar scene, Jaschek's epilepsy acted up again. Meanwhile, Juri had already been taken to the rooftop by the homeless man. With no need for disguises anymore, the homeless man was ready to push Juri off the edge at any moment. Recognizing the man's outfit, Juri immediately realized that the homeless man was none other than Dennis, the boy who had gone missing years ago. Burning with curiosity, Juri asked him what's really on the other side of that wall. Dennis chuckled darkly, saying none of them cared about him, but he's always been by his side. He then pulled out a knife, and just as he was about to strike, a booming voice shouted from behind. It was Ninja coming to the rescue. Unfortunately, Ninja was no match for Dennis in a fight. Juri noticed the toy car clenched tightly in Dennis's hand, the same toy Dennis had always carried as a child. A realization struck him. Seizing the moment, Juri grabbed the toy car. Dennis panicked, using his powers to snatch it back with force. He muttered this was the only gift his mom ever gave him, his voice trembling with emotion. Taking advantage of Dennis's momentary distraction, Ninja suddenly lunged and shoved him off the balcony. At last, the monster's agent on Earth had met his end. Moments later, the store clerk arrived, warning Juri and Ninja that the battle wasn't over yet. As they made their way downstairs, they saw a horde of addicts gathering by the staircase, their bodies pressed against walls, oozing black sludge. With their supply of black blocks cut off, these desperate addicts had resorted to absorbing the sludge directly from the walls. At that moment, the kind-hearted cat owner arrived with a group of residents, urging everyone to disperse for their safety. Meanwhile, Jaschek suddenly woke up at his desk. His eyes were filled with hostility, indicating that he clearly hadn't escaped the monster's control. While Juri and the other two were tracking the creature, an announcement echoed through the hallways. It was Jaschek urging everyone to stay in their rooms and not go anywhere. The kind-hearted cat owner, however, ignored the warning entirely. Determined to rid the building of its filth, he believed he was on the side of justice. But no one noticed the growing number of dark stains spreading across the ceiling above them. Meanwhile, Yuri and his group had arrived at Dennis's apartment. Given Dennis's connection to the monster, they were convinced they'd find important clues there. Just then, Juri noticed a glow emanating from the oven. Moments later, thick sludge began seeping out of it. Strangely though, Ninja and the store clerk seemed oblivious to what was happening. Juri suddenly felt dizzy, his body collapsing to the ground. His consciousness was transported to a bizarre, otherworldly space. From the darkness emerged the creature's true form, a massive, sinister eye. Juri clutched his head in agony, feeling as though the creature could see through his every thought. The monster spoke, its voice resonating through Juri's mind. It said Juri saw more than others did. Juri froze, alarmed that the monster could access his memories. From a young age, Juri had always seen things that didn't exist, something even his father didn't know. The monster spoke again, asking if he would follow it. Without hesitation, Juri rejected the monstrous offer. The next moment, he awoke back in the real world. Before they could make sense of the situation, the oven door suddenly swung open, blasting scorching heat that sent them fleeing from the room. Meanwhile, Jaschek, sitting in his office repairing appliances, heard a faint, unsettling sound coming from the ventilation ducts. His gaze turned vacant again. He repeated his announcement over the building's intercom, saying no one is allowed to leave the building. At that moment, black sludge began seeping from the glass doors leading to the outside world, completely blocking the residents' escape routes. Watching from the monitors, Jaschek spotted the kind-hearted cat owner, who had been rallying the residents against the sludge. Jaschek's voice over the intercom took on a manipulative tone as he declared that the black sludge was about to launch an attack. He claimed that the residents needed to become sacrifices for the sludge, and only a select few would be permitted to leave the building safely. The cat owner, shaken by Jaschek's words, quickly changed his stance. He announced his allegiance to Jaschek, pledging to follow his every command. Jaschek, satisfied, reminded him to help find his son Juri before leaving. Before long, the building's intercom crackled to life once more. Jaschek announced that the building was on the verge of collapse and urged all residents to gather in the recreation room, where he would lead everyone to safety. Most residents obediently left their apartments, while a few reluctant ones were forcibly escorted by the cat owner. Only Cleo ignored all warnings and threats, stubbornly sitting in her bedroom, still clinging to the hope that her missing baby would somehow return. Suddenly, there was a noise from the ventilation duct. Cleo's heart leapt with joy. Surely it must be her child. She rushed to open the vent, peering inside, but all she found were layers of thick cobwebs with no sign of life. Overcome with despair, Cleo refused to believe she had been deceived by the mysterious fortune-teller. She clung to the hope that her baby would return one day. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Juri and his two companions heard Jaschek's broadcast and decided to check out the recreation room. However, as soon as they reached the entrance, they were intercepted by the cat owner standing guard outside. Watching this unfold on the surveillance monitors, Jaschek instructed the cat owner to guide the residents inside. Jaschek felt an unusual sense of satisfaction and even played cheerful music over the intercom. Inside the recreation room, the residents exchanged confused glances, unsure of what Jaschek was up to. At the same time, Yuri had been brought face to face with his father. Curious, he asked what Jaschek's intentions were. Jaschek had no reason to lie to his son. He explained that without the black sludge supporting the building, it would have collapsed years ago. The residents' negative emotions fed the monster, sustaining it in exchange for the building's stability, a mutually beneficial arrangement that Juri's arrival had disrupted. Now, the monster planned to leave the building but required an enormous amount of energy to do so, making the residents the ideal source of nourishment. As soon as Jaschek finished speaking, the residents in the recreation room were horrified to see the freezer door swing open on its own. Thick black liquid began oozing out, and the floor beneath them softened and quickly turned into a black swamp. Panicked, everyone turned to flee for their shitty lives, only to find that the door had been locked by the cat owner. Trapped, they could do nothing but wait for the sludge to consume their smelly parts. The store clerk stumbled as she tried to escape, but fortunately, Ninja managed to pull her sexy body to safety. Meanwhile, Juri was internally scoffing, thinking no sane person would sacrifice humans to help a monster. He knew the monster had exploited his father's emotional wounds, so he revealed the truth about the fire at home. In reality, Juri's mother had suffered from depression and had been planning to end her life for a long time. Her death had nothing to do with anyone else, and Jaschek no longer needed to carry the guilt. Jaschek finally came to his senses, his vision clearing as he shook off the monster's control. Determined to rescue the residents, Jaschek hurried off, but Juri chose to stay behind as he had something even more pressing to handle. After parting ways, Jaschek rushed to the recreation room, only to find the door still blocked by the cat owner. Jaschek wasted no time arguing. He grabbed the cat owner by the neck and subdued him. A nearby neighbor, eager to escape, quickly turned the key in the door. As the door opened, a flood of residents poured out, though their safety was far from assured. The building's main exit was sealed shut, so Jaschek led everyone toward the basement's maintenance door and into the adjacent garbage chute, which he pried open with brute force. He instructed the neighbors to slide down the chute to the basement. During this time, the monster did not appear to interfere. That's because Yuri had returned to Dennis's apartment, where he deliberately climbed into the oven and teleported himself into the black void. In the void, Yuri faced the monstrous form of the monster, which finally revealed itself. Calmly, Juri prepared to negotiate. With the monster's attention diverted, the residents successfully escaped the building. Meanwhile, in her bedroom, Cleo suddenly heard the sound of a child crying coming from the vent. This time, she knew it wasn't her imagination. Overcome with emotion, she rushed to the vent and peered inside like a peeping Tom, finally spotting her child lying there. Her persistence had paid off, and Cleo's family was reunited at last. Not long after, the building's residents gathered in a nearby plaza, each one overwhelmed with a sense of survival and relief. Only Jaschek stood apart, gazing blankly at the building. At that moment, Juri finally received the monster's answer. It revealed that Juri was one of its kind, and that it was time for him to return home. With those words, the monster transformed into an orange portal. Juri's body floated upward as if drawn by an invisible force. As he passed through the portal, Juri felt as though he was drifting in a vast universe, slowly making his way toward the sun. And that concludes the story of the building. It turns out the monster was an alien life form, and Yuri's identity as one of its kind came as an unexpected twist. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.